With that, Michael Britt is going to give us an update on the National Public Safety Broadband Network.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thanks for your time. So for that National Public Safety Broadband Network, we've reviewed this in the past. It's a nationwide network, standards-based technology, $7 billion to build it out. One of the key factors that they built into the legislation is self-sustaining fee-based network with the ability for public-private partnerships and sharing of state and local infrastructure to lower costs, because they kind of recognize that $7 billion will not be enough to build it out. So there's going to be some leveraged infrastructure and participation that is yet to be defined. Will be built and operated by FirstNet, an independent authority, so they're kind of federal but kind of not. And fundamentally, public safety wants, and FirstNet has started to recognize that the network needs to be cheaper than current air cards, more reliable than current air cards, with as good or better coverage, and availability when needed. In other words, priority access over choked cell tower networks that are familiar to people that use for other providers. One key component is the state and local implementation grant program. This is key factors for the grant program are education and outreach and data collection and requirements gathering. Arizona's portion of that $135 million nationally is about $3 million. The grant guidance was released February 6th, and we submitted it on March 19th. We've gone through a number of cycles of clarification with NTIA, who's managing the grant, and we just heard recently that we passed the review process, and the grant has been passed over to NIST, who's going to be managing the actual implementation and award. So we're awaiting the award for that. Some key events. We last presented to the PSCC in March. So since that time, there have been some key activities. With the FirstNet board meeting on April 23rd, they introduced the new general manager, Bill D'Agostino, and that was a watershed event because they could actually get moving and act as a board rather than act as general managers and technical and outreach managers and so forth. So they're really getting some staff on and moving forward. They reported that they were going to submit or release 17 RFIs. There were some issues internally within the FirstNet board about transparency and communication and public safety representation. I'm trying to be politically correct, but Paul Fitzgerald kind of threw a hand grenade in and presented a motion, and it was tabled, but a review committee was established, so they're actually looking at how they're operating. And a lot of this was as a result of the board trying to be both board members and active general managers or outreach managers, and so they were moving as fast as they possibly could without a lot of communication. I think they learned a lesson there. And they introduced their logo, which is, the first thing everybody has to do, right? All right, we attended a regional meeting in California, along with the other states listed. Basically, the purpose of the meeting was to start their education and outreach and to work with the states, communicate, and find out what the states need. They've coined the phrase of these are listening tours. And so presentations by FirstNet board members on what their vision is, what they've heard already from public safety and from those involved. The meetings were organized into breakout sessions by states and then they went breakout sessions by individual discipline, again, gathering any and all information they could. Our attendees were listed here. I think one comment after the first day from Kevin Rogers was, hey, they might actually pull this off. And then the following day, they proceeded to get a little dysfunctional and then kind of set everybody off again. But again, they are trying to move forward with this, and they are listening to people. So that's all we can ask, I think. Another event was the PSCR, Public Safety Communications Research out of Boulder. They have an annual event. I think the first one was about 98 people. The next one was about 200. This was about 500. And I was joking with Jeff Braxter, who puts these together, that he's going to have to get Mile High Stadium the next time around. But 500 plus, a good blend of public safety and vendors. The FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Council, PSAC, met for the first time. Arizona has two representatives, Mike Morrell, Phoenix Fire, and then Councilman Scott Summers, who represents National League of Cities out of Mesa. Basically, Homeland Security gave a good overview of their technical assistance that's geared towards broadband, and we are in line to actually take advantage of that. So we'll be seeing more of that as we get traction on the actual grant and the education and outreach process. Arizona Department of Homeland Security held a tribal seminar, which we were invited to present. I want to thank Yoel Arantia, but he had to leave. It was a really fortuitous to be able to join in with that, because 15 of our 22 tribes were represented at that meeting. Okay, and then I wanted to review some of the activities that FirstNet is moving forward with. Call it gaining traction, because they're kind of moving around and not really getting anything going. And with these education and outreach regional meetings, they've really started to move forward. They've given their vision. Their linked events in the slide presentation. You can get out to their presentations. I've stolen a few slides just to give you a sense of where they're going. This is one of my favorites. They recognize the perceptions. For instance, public safety may have to give up the autonomy and control. They were very clear that they recognize the need for local control of this network. So as the event's happening locally, individuals locally can manage the infrastructure. And various and sundry points, that started as rumors or started as observations. I mean, everybody recognizes $7 billion is not enough, but okay, get over it. Let's figure out a way to do it anyway. General Manager D'Agostino has put together an organizational plan. We have technical officers, operations officers, CIOs, CFOs, Chief Administrative, General Counsel. They recognize they are running a major enterprise here. And so this is heartening to see that they've got all the needed roles and responsibilities outlined, and they've been given the authority to go ahead and move forward and hire these people and get them on board. July 10th, they announced the release of 10 of the 17 RFIs. The number of RFIs has actually gone up to 19. During these regional meetings and discussions at various meetings, the people have been thumping FirstNet for the need to recognize and focus on rural. So some of these RFIs, as part of the regional access network, the actual towers and so forth, they've specialize. Some of these are, I mean, really the bottom 4, 2 through 5, are focused on what rural areas need. So it's heartening to see this now for, states like Arizona. The antenna systems for the current commercial, everybody's focused on urban, high density. The technology is MIMO, the cell edges, you get this maximum volume. For states like Arizona, we're more interested in antennas that can go a lot further than 2.5, 3 miles. Okay, so that's what these RFIs are about. Microwave backhaul, deployables, satellite, so forth. The core is, that's, to me, that's for the vendors to worry about. All right, and then these are pending RFIs, so they haven't released them yet. They wanted to get the kind of technical infrastructure stuff out, and then this is going to be the admin, billing, and so on and so forth. Some other actions that FirstNet has taken. Do the executive order of everybody on the federal side should play nice together. They've taken the opportunity to start working with the FCC and to see if they can get a streamlined EPA and approval and leverage the permitting and so forth to get existing sites to be able to be approved for FirstNet usage quickly, okay, without a lot of red tape. And we can always hope. All right, and FirstNet is put together a very aggressive plan, and the only concern that we've noted is that there's a disconnect between the FirstNet timing and the SLIC-D grant process timing. In other words, they would have the design decided and starting to build before we actually have the stakeholder education and outreach and getting feedback from our stakeholders. We went to the first of 6 regional meetings. By the 6th regional meetings, they actually proactively mentioned the disconnect between NTIA grant process and their timing. And they're working on getting those put together and getting them rationalized. Next step, we expect the grant somewhere between today and mid-August. We'll develop the content for the education and outreach, and then come up with our detailed project and expenditure plans, and then start doing the education outreach. Any questions?
Comments, Mr. Chairman?
Pleasure.
First of all, this is Steve Campbell. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in that regional meeting, and I have to honestly say I went in there real skeptical about a nationwide LTE plan and how they're able to pull this off for public safety. And like any good marketing, they hired a fire chief to come in and market the thing, and told me, but no, seriously, they did a great job in talking about looking at the needs for public safety on a local basis. One of the concerns that was obviously flared up really quickly was the issue that the LTE FirstNet is designed to have both data and voice, and obviously the technology is way down the road before that gets going, and the fact of people buying and spending money on new communication systems, and now if this comes in over the next several years, what does that mean to our communication system as far as radio communication? I don't think you have to worry about that. It's going to be, they're focusing right now primarily on the data portion, and when we broke out into a public safety workshop, I guess if you want to say, they ask a definition of what's the first responder, because it's designed to work with first responders. And there were folks there from Alaska, Marinara Islands, which I've never even heard of, but the fact that the Coast Guard could be a first responder, and obviously I said I'm from Arizona, we don't have to worry about Coast Guard. But the fact was that the differences on who's going to be on this system is going to be, it's good to see that there's going to be local control as far as who's going to be allowed to go on there. again, I was a little skeptical about being able to pull something off like this magnitude with the $7 billion budget, because obviously concerned, because I'm a small agency, and be able to cost that's going to be associated with us converting over to this, the FirstNet, and when it does come around. But I think as Dr. Britt was talking about, is the local control is going to be there. Obviously, he had highlighted the areas of it's got to be cost effective. It's got to be producing and be able to have a better product than what we're getting right now. So I'm encouraged, cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way. That this thing will. I don't think I'll be sitting under a pine tree contemplating the next phase of life by the time. But anyway, I think it's got some good possibilities if it gets down the road. Thank you.
Like a number of years ago, the FCC put out a bid process, and Mesa was awarded the initial core for the Southwest region and included Arizona. Does this continue as part of that, or is FirstNet going to relook at restructuring where the course of the LEC communications are going to go?
To my way of thinking right now, they have not finalized their core backhaul plans. Okay. Now, what Mesa got was a waiver to actually establish a localized 4G LTE network, not supporting any other jurisdictions, either just playing within their footprint.
Great.
And since
but what they understand, that core was going to be large enough to handle a huge area.
One would think that they would leverage that,
yeah.
but that's never happened.
Is the FCC still honoring those, or have they rolled this over to FirstNet?
There was a serious delay, and Mesa opted to cancel their waiver. Okay. Just in terms of the timing of things were getting. Decisions were, they put the BTOP recipients, those that got money to actually build those waiver areas, on hold for a year while the FirstNet legislation was going through and while the board was being established. So many jurisdictions said, we can't wait, and Mesa was one of those. They have allowed some of the BTOP recipients to move forward. They just signed some licensing agreements with LA RICS, and I think Bay RICS is coming up here shortly. So those are going to be the pilot areas of the national.
Too, right?
And Texas has one that's operating. Although they weren't BTOP, they had their own money.
Just take that step further. There was a second, third wave of applicants that were accepted and not decided on by the FCC. What's the status of those? Are those on a shelf, or is that part of the FirstNet also?
More than likely, those will be on the shelf. Although, again, from an Arizona standpoint, we're trying to be at the forefront to make sure that we're in line to get whatever put together that we can.
Thanks for connecting the dots for me.
Okay.
From an Arizona standpoint, how many of the applications came from Arizona?
I know of Yuma and Tucson, but those were never acted on. Those were put on the shelf.
Nothing from the north end?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mike, just to add to that, there are a lot of different organizations like APCO, NPSBN, et cetera, that are all, they have formed different groups, committees, task forces, et cetera, that are starting to develop some standards that they want to have applied to the broadband infrastructure.
Right.
Operating requirements for voice. A lot of that has gone down the road already. I guess the thing that I would encourage folks to do is take a look at the different types of organizations you're involved with, ACO, IASC, et cetera, and look at what some of them may be doing or looking to bring into it. Because some of that will impact the way agencies operate now. I know that I've had a particular eye toward fire operations, and it has a lot of comments into the standards, the requirements that they have been looking at that may not meet some operational requirements regionally. But anyway, there's a lot of that going on.
That's a good point.
And FirstNet stuff also.
And I tell you what, I'll work with you because I've been involved with NPSBN. I've been involved more recently with NGA and NASIO.
Mm-hmm.
And rumor has it APCO is going to let me on the broadband committee. Okay, but I've not dealt with the fire aspect. So maybe we can put together a little one sheet that says, okay, these are the various agencies that are getting their policies put together and or standards, because NPSBN has been working on standards that FirstNet is actually listening to.
So Michael, the first part is this planning part, right? And so first step to that is education and outreach, correct? And then the second part is based on what FirstNet and NTIA's requirements are, we have to gather data, and pass that information back to them so that it gets incorporated to the RFP, into their design, into the network and everything, correct?
And then also along with that, they need to let us know what their business models, what kind of public-private partnerships are appropriate.
Yep.
And then we need to respond to that.
Absolutely. So you got your planning, you got your procurement, you got your execution and implementation, right? And then you've got your adoption, right?
I'm so far from execution.
No, absolutely. But yeah, so far from but I mean from a high level perspective. But I think there's an underlying tone of education, outreach, that continues throughout the entire process, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so
we got to worry about training after that.
Absolutely, but I think adoption, training and adoption, become a critical factor as you go through that. So I think any comments or any feedback you guys have from an education and outreach perspective, right? I think that's going to be such a critical point right now, because I think that if they can get their time frames lined up between FirstNet and between the grants, I think things probably will go very quickly. I mean, that's everything that we've heard up to this point is FirstNet has a legislative mandate, a congressional mandate to implement this. They've got the budget to do it. They're not going to slow down. They're looking for this input. They're looking for this data as fast as possible. So getting this out is widely as possible is absolutely critical in a very short time frame.
Absolutely.
David?
Mr. Chairman, David as well. Dr. Britt, how do you anticipate, from a high level, being new to this committee, how do you anticipate the integration with the existing radio systems that we have built throughout the state?
Well, I mean, that's one aspect that very few people have started to look at yet. I mean, it's a concern to me is, okay, how do you back integrate? I mean, with current CAD systems and so forth. I mean, the technological capability, again, it will be at the data layer and with IP back into the CAD, and in some respects it'll be no more different than a current air card, okay? But then other aspects of it, if you're going nationally to get to CGIS or inlets or whatever, what impacts are those going to have?
It's a whole different technology.
It is.
And is it integrated with next generation 911?
Again, the conversations have just begun.
Yeah.
I will stand by the standby.
But that's critical to have those conversations and to talk about that and to bring those things up. So those are good conversations. We're bringing the 911 office into this conversation. We're currently in the process right now of trying to identify a shared services-based approach to rolling out and refreshing that entire network and all those systems, and to put that on a more of an OpEx type perspective, because recognizing that the current model of CapEx every 7 to 9 year refresh is killing that set of infrastructure. And so it's important to talk about this. It's important to talk about how do you enable data sharing on a platform like this. It was really opening to have, I don't remember the gentleman's name from Texas that came at one of our previous...
Mark Barney.
Yeah, Mark Barney. That was good for me to hear from the standpoint of the way Texas is looking at it right now. They're not looking at this as a replacement to their land mobile radio. They're looking at this to augment, when it works, if it works, how can they get access to data, how can they pipe video, how can they leverage this, in a non-mission critical voice perspective. And so I think that even from the presentation earlier from Robert, hearing the reliance on cell communications already today, how does this start to augment that service and what are those capabilities? But I think right now critical is getting this message out, helping people understand that slide there. I encourage everybody to go and grab that slide and to share that slide earlier in your presentation where it shows, kind of the perception versus reality. I know Michael kind of breezed through it, but please go back and look at that. The slide prior to that as well kind of showed the scope of what FirstNet is trying to accomplish, and I think that's going to be really important to understand. What is that scope? What is that perception versus reality? And for us to continue to ask questions, because I think they're still really broad in general.
If I could follow up with one additional. One thing that was left out of that original presentation was the wireless priority service. I know during the Boston bombing, we used that effectively to communicate between Boston and Tucson from an intelligence perspective. Is that also being contemplated here, or will that be replaced?
Well, and conversations, I mean, again, this is almost like, well, what do we need to worry about?
Right.
Because if you look at it, FirstNet being a massive IP network is really almost like inlet, being a pipeline.
Yep.
So what do you do when do you actually replace that, or do you actually use inlet infrastructure currently? I mean, because they've got some seriously good infrastructure already in place. So,
and that's where the cost would be lower.
Right.
That was one of the first slide. But we got, as a committee, as a commission, we need to be really careful because we can always talk about the bleeding edge of technology. But the reality is the public out there is paying for interoperable systems that may have been outdated, but they're new to us and just being implemented, especially down in Pima County. Middle of a $120 million project that's getting ready to come up on board that other folks have had in place since the late 90s. They're not going to be ready to pay for another system for 20 years. And if we start talking about the next wave, we're going to undo what we're trying to do right now.
Yep.
Be real careful about talking about wishware and the reality of what we're trying to implement right now.
Question back?
I've got a bullet on your slide which is regarding a grant that today. What is that exactly?
The award,
the
planning.
education and outreach, the SWIG-G grant, that would cover Public Safety Interoperable Communications Office going out to every jurisdiction statewide, doing education and outreach, all the tribes, all the associations, and so forth, getting feedback from those jurisdictions, validating what is critical infrastructure to them, what is population coverage, footprint, and so forth that they need.
Is that going to have to be accomplished by that end date?
Well, it's a 3-year performance period for the grant. Okay. Which date were you talking about?
You had it like from today up until...
Oh, that was the announcement of the award for the state of Arizona. Once we get the award, then we have 3 years to do the education outreach and the data collection and coverage requirements. Okay. All right.
Yep. Thank you.